Kellyanne Conway, the president's high-profile counselor, has been at the center of just about every controversy swirling around the Trump White House. I sat down with her in New York. Kellyanne Conway, welcome.
Hi, Howie.
The leaking of the president's tough calls with the leaders of Australia and Mexico is extraordinary, and it suggests that there are senior officials in the government who are trying to undermine Donald Trump. How concerned are you about that?
Well, we're very concerned because we're not leakers. You saw this with the previous intelligence report from that January 6th briefing. We're tight-lipped. We respect the intelligence and security process and the fact that as Commander-in-Chief and President of the United States, let alone those who serve the President, we're duty-bound to this country to not leak information that could jeopardize all of us.
Wait, what can you do about the leakers?
Well, same thing here. I mean, it could be, I'm not going to conclude. It's been speculated on Fox and other places, Howie, so I'll just repeat the speculation.
State Department?
Could be State Department officials who are holdovers. It certainly isn't Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and his close advisors. But Rex Tillerson, as our new Secretary of State, sworn in this week, I was there, he has made very clear that people at State should expect major changes coming, and I would assume a leaking is one of them. I can't imagine it came from the Australian or Mexican side because the calls, as reported, were very unflattering to those two leaders. But look, Donald Trump is somebody who's going to put America first, and is going to be resolute and decisive, but also polite.
When the president this week fired Acting Attorney General Sally Yates, an Obama holdover, a lot of journalists compared it, unfairly in my view, to Nixon's Saturday Night Massacre. That, of course, was a criminal investigation of the White House and Nixon's own AG and Deputy AG. But it generated a lot of bad press. Was that unfair?
The bad press from that would be very unfair. If she can't execute on the President of the United States' vision, then she shouldn't be there. If she disagrees with what he's doing, and maybe she shouldn't have been there from the beginning, but he has the right to seat his own government. How about, I've got a novel idea, how about if the Senate just confirms his nominee to the Department of Justice for Attorney General, Jeff Sessions? The Democrats have delayed his hearing, delayed his vote. They've tried to humiliate and embarrass him. As we sit here right now, we have a record number of unconfirmed nominees to a presidential cabinet, 11, including Treasury and Commerce. So the Democrats want to go on the record. They have time to go and cry and weep at the airports, protesting something that they've completely bastardized as to what it truly is and what its intent and what its effect is, this immigration order.
Well,
and yet they don't have time to give a fair hearing and an up or down vote on these nominees. You want to vote against, but at least give people the hearing and the decency of a vote.
The media verdict on the first 2 weeks of the administration, and this is especially true of the temporary ban on refugees and the detentions at the airports, I would say was one of chaos and confusion. Is there a learning curve for the president and his top people?
There are several things that go on with any executive order. I think any executive action. You've got policy, you have legal review and approval, and you have communications and rollout. And so we are very focused on all three of those pieces.
Is there a learning curve?
On behalf of the president. There's a learning curve for any administration, but I also think that any chance people get to try to demean or diminish this president, they take it and they gnaw at it. And that goes for all of us on the senior team. They gnaw at all of us, but it doesn't work. And here's why it doesn't work. And I'd like to put everybody on notice of that, because it's not reflective of the rest of the country. If you look at even some of the early polls, Americans, a plurality of Americans, Howie, depending on how the question is asked, they like the content of this executive order. They do think that a president's first duty is to keep people safe. They do agree that there are state sponsors of terrorism, these 7 countries that are, it's a narrowly prescribed, narrowly tailored list that President Obama and the Congress first put forward. It is temporary. It gives us a nice deep breath, a pause to find out if our vetting processes are actually as good as they can be. And also, if you look at the Supreme Court pick, that got subsumed because it was such a brilliant pick in Judge Neil Gorsuch that it got subsumed by other negative coverage because his judicial temperament, his record, and his academic credentials are beyond reproach.
I think even analysts on the left said that Neil Gorsuch is a very highly qualified Supreme Court nominee, but you spoke a moment ago about not giving a nominee a vote, and a lot of the coverage has been about Democrats wanting payback for the fact that President Obama's guy Merrick Garland never even got a hearing. But don't both parties have unclean hands here when it comes to acting on nominees?
Well, the last I saw, you have to be 30 years old to be in the United States Senate under our Constitution, not 12 years, 10 years old, and some of them are acting like that. And if you're going to behave like that, then you're going to see us just plow forward with these nominees and rely upon a majority in the Senate, Howie, that America put there. America decided they wanted a conservative Republican president.
Steve Bannon is getting a lot of bad press. He's on the cover of Time magazine as the great manipulator, as a New York Times editorial headline, President Bannon. Do you think the fact that he stays away from the cameras contributes to what he calls his Darth Vader image?
The fact that he's effective for President Trump contributes to that image, because people are just constantly trying to take down President Trump through each of us, like we're bowling pins. We'll just knock one down at a time. It's not going to work because we're a very tight group. You know, we all lived in the foxhole together, and there weren't that many of us. In the case of Steve Bannon, he is the chief strategist to the President of the United States. But the ultimate strategist, the ultimate decision maker, the ultimate voice and choice for everything, make no mistake, is President Donald J. Trump. And anybody who doesn't understand that or writes against that fact, that is a fact, is just reporting inaccurate information.
You told Sean Hannity on the radio the other day that the media are inciting a mob mentality, if not mob violence. Now, I understand you're upset about negative coverage. That's a very strong charge. Even
so
tangentially, how would you say that media coverage, even negative media coverage, could lead to mob violence?
Did you see the cameras that were put on people? They gave all these people vaunted status last weekend. The martyrs at the airport, the conscientious civic participants.
Are you saying that protests shouldn't be covered? There should be no cameras?
No. Protests are part of our First Amendment.
Right.
We support everybody's
And cameras
First
clearly
Amendment.
attract protesters. We've seen this in some of the urban riots.
Okay, well, why don't they go? Okay, why don't they go and talk to? And they are the media, because they already missed America. The big problem for them is they just did not understand America and aren't much interested in most of America. Thumb their nose at most of America, and you know that. America didn't go to the fancy Ivy League schools like many in the media did. America doesn't. You know, there are some people in the media, their latte and dry cleaning bill for the year is basically what people earn in some of these districts and counties that Donald Trump won, because he's the blue-collar billionaire who connected with real Americans. And so fast forward, why don't they go and they see who's actually going to benefit and talk to the people who are actually literally tangibly going to benefit from Donald Trump keeping the factories here and not in Mexico and China.
When you say some of these more important stories aren't covered, I'm just looking at the New York Post here, and there's this whole spread, and it says, he calls them the Presidentator. Trump versus Iran, Trump versus Australia, Trump versus Mexico, and then it's continued here. Trump versus the Berkeley protests, Trump versus Arnold and his ratings. Isn't it true the White House makes so much news that a lot of this stuff, there simply isn't the bandwidth to cover it as much as might be?
There's plenty of bandwidth. Come on, there's online. The internet is infinite. The New York Post was able to put it on 2 pages. So what's wrong with everyone else? It's a matter of selective coverage. I've said before, and I'll say on your show because it's media buzz, and thanks for the platform, Howie. It's not just biased coverage. Bias is easy to detect. Look at the guy beating his wife. Okay, biased coverage. But it's the incomplete coverage. It's all the stories that are not told. It's cherry picking and curating the quotes. It's this reductive, curated media culture in which we live. And of course, the media are watching this now in their pajamas saying, oh my God, or from brunch or jogging saying, oh my God, she's picking on the media again. No, I'm not. I'm asking you to do a service to America, because we will have joint custody of America for 8 years here. So let's do a service to America by giving them the full story. A lot of Americans suffer from information underload. For all the information overload we have online, in print, in conversation.
You think there's too many empty calories?
I think there's information underload, and people get obsessed. They're so afraid to depart from the sameness of coverage. If they all watch, you've been in these offices, they all watch the same 6 TV screens.
Well, the president has a big megaphone.
Oh my God, we have to do what everybody else is doing. Why? Because, and then pretend you're an independent thinker, or somehow you're unique, or you're this disruptor. The disruptor, the independent voice here, is Donald Trump. That's how he got elected, because he sounded different and he does things differently. And he's gone to Washington in the span of 2 short weeks, Hillary, and you could just measure and feel and see the difference, not just in tone, but in content, in volume.
Let us know what you think. MediaBuzz@foxnews.com. Ahead, we'll have more of my interview with Kellyanne Conway. But when we come back, our panel weighs in on those leaks of President Trump's private calls to foreign leaders. Why was that furnished to the press? The Washington Post and the AP, as I mentioned, published leaked accounts of President Trump's tough phone calls with the leaders of Australia and Mexico, triggering a wave of coverage and criticism.
These leaks are astounding. A president threatening to march troops into Mexico.
Believe me, when you hear about the tough phone calls I'm having, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. They're tough. We have to be tough. It's time we're going to be a little tough, folks. We're taken advantage of by every nation in the world virtually.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Aaron McPike, political commentator and former reporter for Real Clear Politics. Kelly Riddell, Washington Times deputy opinion editor, and Marie Harf, former spokeswoman for the State Department and CIA in the Obama administration and a brand new Fox News contributor. Aaron McPike, and you have a new job, I should have mentioned, at Independent Journal Review. What do you make of the leaking of these phone calls? I've never seen anything like it.
Well, I think it's wrong to lump these two different phone calls into the same category because we don't know where the leaks came from.
True.
People are assuming that they came from the White House. I think particularly with respect to Mexico, I think if you read that Associated Press story very closely, it could be that that leak came directly from Mexico.
Is there a danger when you take someone's account of a call or even a transcript that's a partial transcript that you're not getting the full story, you're certainly not getting the tone of a talk between two leaders?
Yes, and this is where this AP story in particular went wrong. It was a partial transcript, and then the reporter took their own confirmation bias. They want to put out bad news against Donald Trump, spun it, and then, you know, in the AP story, it never said that Donald Trump was going to send troops down to Mexico to get those bad hombres. It said bad hombres, it threatened troops, and then it was allowed everyone in the liberal media to go on online social media, and it exploded. Donald Trump sending troops down to Mexico. You know, you had Jon Favreau, who was a speechwriter for Obama, who, you know, famously laughed with Charlie Rose about the line that if you like your health care, you can keep it. Right on Twitter, oh my gosh, we're going to war with Mexico now. I mean, this is the
some of that was tongue-in-cheek, wasn't it?
It's all fake news, though, and it perpetuates the narrative that the press wants to put out there.
Well,
that
let
is
me get
negative
Marie
about
in here because you've actually dealt with reporters and as an administration spokeswoman. In this kind of context, wouldn't only very senior officials at the White House and perhaps the State Department have access to information about these calls?
Absolutely. I think only very, very small number of officials at the White House. I would doubt that anyone in the Trump State Department probably had access to these.
Why so?
Because they don't seem to be relying on them for policy guidance on things like the refugee ban. Rex Tillerson hadn't even been confirmed yet when they did these calls, so I would be shocked if they even shared these with the State Department.
Would you agree with
particularly with Obama holdovers, as Kellyanne mentioned in your interview?
But would you agree that somebody was trying to embarrass or damage President Trump?
I don't know what the reason was, right? It's hard to get in people's heads. I think some people might have been concerned about the tone and wanted to send a message that this is not how you do foreign policy. This is irresponsible. It's not how you behave as president. And we know the Trump administration, when they were a campaign, said that they messaged to him through the media. So who knows why they did this?
Well, the coverage has certainly been harsh, particularly about the call with the Prime Minister of Australia, because Trump was reported to have said this was his worst call of the day, even though he talked to Putin that day, and ended the call after 25 minutes. It was supposed to go an hour. Big disagreement over an Obama administration deal to send a certain number of refugees from Australia to the U.S. So the coverage certainly was not favorable on that.
No, I think it hasn't been favorable on either one of those stories. But again, we're trying to get to the bottom of where the leaks came from. And
well, we can't. It's somewhat speculation because we don't know who the anonymous sources are.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
But speaking of coverage, you know, it just happened over the weekend that a federal judge in Seattle temporarily blocked the president's order on limited travel ban for refugees in those 7 countries. And Trump very strongly went after this judge, called him a so-called judge. That has gotten a lot of media coverage and criticism.
Yeah, and you know, it's a Twitter tweet. That's all it is. It's not attacking.
Well, all of presidential tweets get lots of attention.
Let's put this in context. You had Obama in 2010 go after the Supreme Court in a State of the Union speech after the Citizens United case. You had, leading up to the Obamacare ruling in 2012, a very organized political campaign starting at the White House, targeting John Roberts and basically saying if you don't rule for Obamacare here, you're politicizing the court system. So this is not a new thing for presidents to go after court rulings that they don't quite agree with or try to manipulate court rulings in their favor.
Brief comment, but of course Trump uses colorful language. We know that about him.
Right, but there's a difference between attacking personally, a federal judge. Trump did it on the campaign when he attacked the Mexican-American judge. He did it now, and it's calling into legitimacy the judiciary. It's not just saying...
Oh, doesn't that go a little far? I mean, he's taking a shot at a guy whose ruling he disagreed with.
What does so-called mean?
All right, well...
That is
we'll let the viewers decide, because I've got to get a break. Up next, President Trump stirring some controversy, more controversy, when Bill O'Reilly asks him about Vladimir Putin in that upcoming Super Bowl sit-down, and later, Kellyanne Conway on being battered by the press for making a mistake. Bill O'Reilly's sit-down with President Trump airs today before the Super Bowl, and what's already making news is this response to a question about whether the president, and he said he does, respects Vladimir Putin.
Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's very
He's a
possible
killer,
I
though.
won't.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Kelly Riddell, Huffington Post headline, Trump defends, quote, killer Putin.
I think that the press needs to cool down a little bit. Donald Trump is not a politician, and he's not always going to speak politically. Now, we got to look at what his administration is actually doing. You had Nikki Haley going into the UN this week with a very heated, very confrontational attitude towards Russia,
So
what
in
they're doing in the Crimea.
In your view, that is more important than
look at the action.
What he says in a nationally televised interview?
He had a conversation with the Ukrainian president this week that went very positively, according to both sides, and the readout, both sides. Increasing spend there and maybe some military support. So we've got to look at what he's doing, not the rhetoric.
The president you worked for, Barack Obama, was often criticized by the right for not sufficiently embracing American exceptionalism. What would have been the reaction on the right? President Obama had said that about we have killers, and what about our country?
I can only imagine the outrage we would have gotten. I think the words do matter. I think policies matter. I also think when you're president of the United States, words matter. And that was a bizarre exchange he had with Bill O'Reilly.
Now, in a cold-blooded way, even Donald Trump may be right, but it's not the kind of thing presidents usually say. And the media, I think, are not accustomed to the way in which this president speaks. And this goes to what we talked about last segment about so-called judge. I mean, he speaks colorfully, and he doesn't sort of edit himself on every syllable.
Right. And look, we're trying to establish a double standard. We know that there is a bit of a double standard, but here's the thing. Barack Obama didn't say that. It was Donald Trump who said that. So I think we need to slow down and question Donald Trump and continue to question Donald Trump till we get to the bottom of what he means. He's going to be president for 4 years. We'll continue hearing from him, and we will continue asking the questions.
You'll know what he means through his actions, and I think that's what we as the press
almost seem to be saying, don't listen to what the President of the United States says, let's only look at the policy. And obviously every president gets enormous attention for everything they say.
Yeah, and he's going to get...
Am I being unfair?
No, you're not being unfair, but instead of whipping this all up into a crazy level of hysteria, we need to draw it back and look at the policies, or we're going to miss the story. In 4 years, people will be better off in this country, and the press will have no idea why that happened or what occurred.
Well, it's only a Super Bowl interview. I don't imagine it's going to get that much attention.
Right.
All right. Let me mention before we get to that the president, again, in a meeting with African-American leaders, took another whack at CNN. He called CNN fake news. And what's happening is that, with one exception since the election, no senior administration official, I believe, has appeared on CNN. I think that's a mistake. In fact, Vice President Pence on 4 Sunday shows today is not on CNN. I think that's a mistake. I think it's kind of self-defeating. I didn't particularly like it when the Obama White House did that to Fox, very rarely making a senior official available. I am told, my sources say, that will change, though, in the coming days. Now, you can see Bill O'Reilly's full Super Bowl pregame interview with President Trump, 4 p.m. Eastern on your local Fox broadcast channel. Ahead on Media Buzz, the Super Bowl, as you know, is tonight. Why are the media so laser-focused on Tom Brady's relationship with Donald Trump? But first, Kellyanne Conway on the highly personal criticism that comes with working for this president. More now of my conversation in New York with Kellyanne Conway. You are drawing a lot of flack for telling MSNBC's Chris Matthews, talking about a couple of Iraqi refugees in the U.S. who became terrorists, that there had been a Bowling Green massacre, and it wasn't covered. Of course, there was no Bowling Green massacre.
There's a plot. But they're masterminds. I had said that before. They're masterminds. I should have said plot, and I should have just called them terrorists. But everybody should look at the ABC News article that I was referring to. That, of course, is trending, top trending article now on ABC News because I mentioned it. It's from 2011 or so, and it talks about these two radicalized Iraqis. They're part of al-Qaeda. They bragged about attacking American soldiers. They are, they knew how to make IEDs. You just have to laugh. It's a lot of the haters. Listen, it's a lot of the haters. I clarified immediately. I should have said terrorists and not massacre. MSNBC and Chris Matthews show never even asked, never corrected it. I got kudos and accolades for giving that interview. 18 hours later, they popped up and reared their heads. So
you made a mistake. It happens. It happens to all of us. But when the press makes a mistake,
it happens a lot to the press. I mean, the corrections in these newspapers are 3 paragraphs long. I misspoke one word. The corrections in the newspapers who are attacking me are 3 paragraphs long every day. Corrections, like major corrections.
But should the White House be attacking the press for, quote, fake news on the basis of a mistake that is then corrected?
That is not what the president means when he says fake news on his Twitter. He is talking about things that are invented and not just inaccurate. But look, I'm one of the most pro-press, open, pro-First Amendment people at the White House. Can I just say something? Yeah. It's a lot of women, and that's a shame, because everybody pretends there's some kind of power of the sisterhood. But I'm pro-life, so that's not good for them.
Speaking of women,
I am the first successful female campaign manager. I don't talk about that. I don't brag about that. I feel like it's a blessing, and I thank God every day that Donald Trump gave me that opportunity, and I had a fabulous team that I worked with as equals, and we got the job done on behalf of America.
Chelsea Clinton, addressing you, said, "Don't make up fake attacks." Speaking of female critics.
Right. I thought that was funny, since NBC News' Today Show had paid her, wasn't it them? Paid her so much money.
NBC overall.
I think it came out to like $600,000 a year. I don't remember one report she did. If you do, please help me. But I have nothing against Chelsea Clinton. I always treated her like a Fabergé egg when she was in the White House as a teenager. We'll see if Barron Trump gets the same respect. So far, he hasn't.
And he should.
People in the media.
Absolutely should.
She should leave me out of it. And she should know, she and her network should have called me. NBC News has called in a lather, breathlessly apologizing to me. But why did the reporter who texted me at 6:32 a.m. this morning asking me about a different story for the Today Show and said, "For the Today Show, please comment on this," why didn't he ask me about what I had said the night before on his network? I turned on Today Show this morning and I'm being attacked. And then there's an apology retroactively after 5 million people see that, and all the haters on Twitter who should get jobs in the Donald Trump administration. They will be available to you soon. Give me a call.
You told Chris Wallace, talking about the campaign and all the journalists and the pontificators who utterly got the election wrong, that none of these people have been fired. Do you think news organizations should fire some people who got it wrong?
Well, how about just admitting, getting out of the denial, grief, and anger stages and getting on with acceptance? But part of the acceptance has to be some introspection and soul searching. I mean, they were wrong up until 1 a.m. on November 9th, and it was the road to 270, you have no path. We have all the clips. I know people are wondering if I'm talking about them, but so let it be a Lord of the Flies situation where they don't know if I'm talking about them. And even in the case of this massacre nonsense, where I corrected it right away and clarified it, which I'm sure it'll live on for a week, I didn't mention the people by name. I didn't mention by name the prominent editor of a very successful liberal website last night, saying, "I'm going to write a whole story about your tweet about the Holocaust." I said, "Did I tweet about the Holocaust?" And he said, "Oh my God, it was a fake account." And he said, "Go on carrying about, helping the president." I'll hang my. I don't say his name because I don't want him to get what I get, which are death threats and haters and people mentioning my kids by name and showing up at my house. It just seems to me that the presumptively negative coverage and the snarkiness that was put upon Donald Trump, the candidate, the nominee, the president-elect, and now the president, all looks the same to me. There's never been a deep breath of some of these networks and cable stations saying, he's the president now, and we ought to cover him as such. We ought to show the respect and the deference to the office and try to get it right. I see very little of that. I'm open to that, folks. You know where to find me, off of Twitter. Call me, email me, text me. But look, Chelsea Clinton attacking me. Really, Chelsea? Because your mom said Texas and Georgia and Arizona were turning blue, so you went and spent all this money there, and you ignored Wisconsin and Michigan, and we did not. And we won them, and Donald Trump won.
You mentioned women's magazines. Cosmopolitan, and a relatively sympathetic profile of you, had passages like this. How does Conway, loving mom, devoted friend, appealing person in close quarters, square her conscience with what she signed on to do? Explain the actions of a man who's been accused of fraud, sexual assault, collusion with Russia, leveraged the hate-mongering movement of the white supremacist alt-right.
Because I know the full measure of the man, and people should also pay attention to who he is and what all the great he's already doing for this country and will do for all Americans. He will create. He's already creating more jobs and keeping jobs here, boosting wages. He's already making good on campaign promises.
But you get that a lot. You seem like a nice person. How do you work for this president?
Very easily. I love the man and I respect him tremendously, and I know that he and his family have sacrificed so much for him to be president of the United States.
Kellyanne Conway, thanks very
Always
much for
a pleasure.
joining us.
Thank you.
Minutes after President Trump fired Acting Attorney General Sally Yates for refusing to defend his temporary ban on refugees, I happened to be on the air and predicted what would happen next.
Sally Quillian Yates now takes her place in history beside Elliot Richardson, the last Attorney General who directly defied the President of the United States. On a Saturday, 44 years ago in 1973.
Since Nixon, since the Saturday Night Massacre, we have not had a president dismiss someone because she disagreed with the legal analysis.
We're back with the panel, and Erin, I said this to Tucker Carlson the next morning, New York Times, fifth paragraph, Saturday Night Massacre, which of course involved a criminal probe of the Nixon White House over Watergate.
That's right. Look, both Donald Trump and Sally Yates did exactly what they should have done. Sally Yates is a Democrat. She's an Obama holdover. I want to actually...
Wait. I don't. You're going to get a lot of tweets, but before we go on. Sally Yates, if she disagreed with this, could have resigned. Instead, she made a big political move, and you're saying that's okay?
Well, also, Donald Trump was right to fire her. I think from the independent voice of reason here, I think both sides did exactly what can be expected of them. Let me read you a comment that came from an article this week by my former editor, I should say, Carl Cannon. She was setting herself up for a 7-figure salary in private practice, risking a job she was going to lose in a week or two anyway.
She was going to lose the job. Marie Harf, even the liberal Harvard lawyer Alan Dershowitz, who opposes the refugee policy of President Trump, told CNN that Sally Yates was wrong and that this was a political objection she was making, not a legal one.
I got the sense that it was actually a legal one. And I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I actually agree with Aaron. I think she did what her job was. She was in that job.
The Office of Legal Counsel at the Justice Department had already proved this on legal grounds.
The Office of Legal Counsel is not the end-all, be-all. They've had a checkered history on some issues, including torture during the Bush administration. So they are very good lawyers, but they are not free from being asked by the Attorney General about their work.
You don't think she was grandstanding?
I agree with Aaron. She did what her job was. I think she felt she had a legal responsibility. And now, after we've seen multiple federal judges appointed by Democrats and Republicans standing up and questioning the refugee ban, what she did actually doesn't seem that crazy. But I agree that the massacre language...
It was too much. It was overblown. Absolutely. And Donald Trump was right to fire her, too. I mean, he was right. He's a Republican.
Let me get Kellyanne. Talk about the optics of the way this was covered. And there was suddenly sort of woman in the news, Sally Yates, what a thing she did. She was an Obama holdover who was on her way out and did this, at least in part, to get attention.
Political grandstanding. She wants a job at MSNBC as a political pundit, and I'm sure she'll get one in a few weeks. And she's a liberal hero. But the rule of law was not followed here. She passed through a lot of things under Eric Holder's watch that were questionable.
But come back to the press coverage.
The press coverage was overblown. The massacre thing was completely wrong. CNN went with it all day Monday, and then they still had stuff online on their site on Thursday calling it a Sunday night massacre.
Yeah. Plus, you got to fire more than one person to have it be a massacre. All right, let me move to the Supreme Court nomination. A huge story this week, because there's been so much news this week. Here are liberal and conservative analysts weighing in on the president's pick of Neil Gorsuch.
So if President Trump makes no other decisions that are praised by both sides, this will be the most memorable. He couldn't have picked a more effective, respected conservative intellectual.
But what I'm so impressed with in terms of Judge Gorsuch is not only the fact that he has incredible credentials, that he has the judicial temperament.
So I was impressed by the fairness in which these legal analysts and others dealt with Judge Gorsuch, but at the same time, the media made it clear the battle is not going to turn on his judicial record.
You think they made that clear?
I think the big story is Democrats, want to slow this down or defeat it because they are still angry about Merrick Garland and Senate Republicans.
I do think that that's part of it, but I do think that the coverage was that this guy is probably going to get through. I think Kellyanne...
But that's a different point.
No, but I think that was actually a big part of the coverage after the pick. I disagree with Kellyanne that it got subsumed. I think he got a lot of good press.
Do you think, I mean, it is fair to say that Democrats are going to fight this and that they are still angry about what happened to Merrick Garland?
It's a story and it's happening on the Hill, and so it should be covered in that direction. I agree. I thought the press was very positive here. The only quorums I had was leading up to the announcement and how CNN and other Forbes, for example, basically said Donald Trump's trying to grandstand for primetime ratings when actually Supreme Court justice rollouts have happened in primetime before.
Because there were reports that turned out to be untrue that the other contender, Tom Hardiman, was also heading to D.C. so we wouldn't know who got the pick. But it turned out he was at a gas station in Altoona and he wasn't coming to Washington.
But they did move it up to take away from the bad coverage on the refugee ban. I think that's been pretty well acknowledged in the press. They moved up the public rollout so they could get some good news.
To the extent the press is portraying this as the Democrats are going to get even with Republicans and the Republicans did this last year with Garland, this strikes me as what people hate about Washington. And isn't there an element of truth to that the media are focusing on?
I think
there's so much pettiness and holding of grudges.
I think that's part of what Americans hate about Washington. I also think Americans, though, don't like hypocrisy. And I think it's hard for some Americans when they see Republicans now saying, he needs a vote right away, we need to move forward right away. Wait a second. We remember what happened to Merrick Garland. We know that he should have at least gotten meetings, hearings, conversations on the Hill. So I think people don't like that either.
Hypocrisy in both parties. They both cry obstructionist when their party controls the White House, and I think that's pretty clear by now. Marie Harf, Kelly Riddell, Aaron McPike, thanks very much. We hope you like our Facebook page. We post a lot of original content. We do videos in response to your questions about the media, MediaBuzz at foxnews.com. Check out my news abuse segments. This is the really egregious stuff every Monday night with Tucker Carlson, and I like going back and forth on Twitter at Howard Kurtz. DVR the show. If you miss it, you can watch it at your convenience. And we are back here next Sunday. Enjoy the Super Bowl with the latest buzz.